Hello, I'm Emily. Today I'm joined by my colleague at Caddy, Chris Brown, to talk about the world of digital transformations. This is a phrase that's been used to refer to many different technological advances at many different times. And Chris is a real veteran of innovation in manufacturing spaces. He's witnessed some of these revolutions firsthand. So I'm very excited to hear, what he's seen work, what he's seen be an obstacle, and how he's seen companies rise to these occasions. How's it going, Chris?
It's going well. Thank you for that very warm introduction there.
So I'd like to start by talking about what were kind of some pivotal moments that you've seen in your career where a company really kind of had to change gears and adopt something new, and how did that work out for them?
Absolutely. So, I entered into the manufacturing space in 2006, 2007. And in that, uh, at that time, right, this industry was really transferring from 2D CAD to 3D CAD. And this was a really pivotal moment in the industry. SolidWorks was gaining massive amounts of market share at the time. 3D CAD was gaining massive amounts of market share. And the supply base was not necessarily catching on to that. And so you had OEMs and you had advanced tier ones working inside of 3D CAD models, transferring fully to 3D CAD modeling, as where the supply base could really only work off of 2D drawings, and they only wanted to accept 2D drawings for quote purposes, manufacturing purposes, etc. And I remember a lot in those early days, especially as a sales rep, having this contention between, needing 3D CAD modeling capabilities. And here I was at Protolabs that exclusively worked off of 3D CAD models and didn't want the 2D drawings. And that helped them really gain a lot of market share with these OEMs and with those larger tier ones out there, because it was compatible with how they were working, as where the rest of the manufacturing base and fabrication base really took a back seat to that innovation and that leap forward into this digital space of 3D CAD modeling. When you fast forward, maybe 5, 6, 7 years beyond that, I'm thinking of a time around 2015, 2016, where product data was living inside of the 3D CAD model, right? This is often described as model-based definitions, where we're actually putting the GD&T, we're putting the materials, we're putting tolerancing information, everything that needs to be there inside of the model, rather than making a separate drawing in order to convey that message. I think the only thing that I can say to that is there's still a lot of contention around that, right? Here we are in 2024, almost 2025 now. Model-based definitions haven't really taken off. Some of the largest companies in the world, when I think about who's adopting it, I think of companies like Ford, who's adopted it in model-based definitions incredibly well, but their supply chain hasn't yet. And so there's this intermediary file called a 3D PDF that everything has to be converted into in order to give it to the supply chain. And then what does the supply chain do with it? They take it and convert it into a flat file PDF so that they can actually read it without even having to reference that 3D CAD model still to this day. And that's really a point of contention still within supply chains between the largest companies in the world and the fabricators that support them, is moving not just from analog to digital, like we did when everything went from 2D to 3D, but now digital to kind of what I would call digital plus, where you have this additional amount of data inside of that 3D CAD model. And that revolution's taking a really long time to transition in the industry.
That's really fascinating. I think you've identified something that is common with a lot of these big digital leap forwards, which is there is gaps where somewhere along the supply chain you lack that cross compatibility. You can imagine this is before either of our times, calling up your supplier and saying, okay, well, fax me over the drawings. And they go, what the hell is a fax machine? But I think every time there is this sort of gap in compatibility, that also represents an opportunity for a competitive advantage, right? If you can be the first mover on a certain level of a supply chain to say, okay, not only are we supplying you the parts we want, but we're working in the data formats you like. We're compatible with all the systems that this is going to ultimately be led into. That's a massive advantage. That's just a level of fluency and compatibility that a lot of your competitors aren't going to be able to match. At the same time, though, as you say, sometimes these things take a while. It takes a long time for a new standard to propagate. So I find what a lot of shops like to do is just open themselves up to diversity. It's not about putting all your chips in on, okay, this new file format is the way of the future. We're saving absolutely everything in it. But I think Caddy is actually a great example of something that can be very agnostic, that can kind of work with your data no matter what format it's coming in and let it live no matter what sort of system wants to access it. So yeah, I'm very interested in kind of, obviously we both think Caddy is a great example, but what other kind of cutting edge, up and coming aspects of maybe the next digital transformation you foresee?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think, with model-based definitions really taking their foothold in the door, I think, if I had a crystal ball, so to speak, right, I would foresee a lot of software being developed in regards to translating those types of files between various native formats. It is not always going to be the case, where the Boeings of the worlds and the Fords of the worlds that are designing inside of CATIA, that their supply chain has the financial wherewithal to be able to afford, the absolute best 3D CAD modeling software that's out there, the most expensive CAD modeling software that's out there. And so as model-based definitions take off inside of 3D CAD, we're going to have to find ways of converting that while retaining the data into a file format in which a more affordable viewer can see. And you hit the nail on the head there, right? Caddy is at the absolute most advanced aspect of this. We're able to extract that model-based definitions directly from the models, be able to database them in ways, and we are agnostic in that regard. So it doesn't matter if you're using model-based definitions inside of CATIA or inside of SolidWorks or inside of any of these other softwares. We're able to extract that data no matter who sent you that file at that fabricator shop. I think we're going to see a few other things in regards to digital transformation over the course of the next 5 or so years. I think that there's going to be a really, really large leap forward in regards to the types of work that humans do. Since I got into this industry and PDMs and PLMs have been massively available to humans to be able to use, humans have had to enter that data into a PLM or a PDM system. And this started with backdated projects. I've always kind of joked, bring in the interns, right? But it's not a joke. These massive organizations bring in interns every single summer in order to convert their flat file 2D PDFs and extract all the data off of them in order to enter that data into a PDM or a PLM system. We have people, engineers, very expensive resources, who as soon as they get done doing all of their model-based definitions or creating their 2D drawing with the title block, who then have to sit there and manually copy and paste that data into a PDM or into a PLM system. Again, definitely speaking selfishly a little bit here, but Caddy can extract all that data and transfer that over to those PDM and PLM systems. And then the big elephant in the room then becomes, how do we convert these 2D drawings into 3D CAD models? And that's where I'm not being selfish, because this is not a place where Caddy's playing at all right now. And as a matter of fact, companies like Dassault have very large bounties out for this software, by which if you can scan a 2D drawing into a system and it output automatically a 3D CAD model, they'll come in and they'll buy your organization for pretty much whatever you want. And that's something that I'm very interested in seeing happen here soon, especially working for a company like Caddy, where we're going through and digitizing all of these old documents for companies. I recently saw a drawing from 1893, a mechanical engineer drawing that was that old. And to be able to turn that into a 3D CAD model today with just scanning it and having an output of a step file or an IGES file or a SolidWorks file, that would be incredibly cool and really allow us to explore where we've come from in mechanical engineering in order to set up a pathway to where we're going.
That's really fascinating. It's amazing to think of that sort of almost miraculous potential, having a drawing that's over 100 years old kind of come to life as a 3D model. I think you make a really interesting point here. My background is in tech, and in tech we've seen a very similar sort of revolution towards agnosticism in file types, towards things not requiring a proprietary language, not needing a certain compiler, not needing a certain runtime environment. You know, basically, instead of a program being a very specialized thing that's built for one very particular environment, this latest advances in AI, the biggest one being like large language models and stuff, now lets those things kind of just exist as human legible ideas. And I think a similar change is sort of happening with manufacturing drawings and stuff, that for such a long time they're almost trapped in these proprietary systems. And now they're kind of fully realizing their versatility as if they were just sort of paper drawings again, a paper drawing that you could magically parse and 3Dify and warp to any location in the world, granted, but with all of the sort of immediate understanding and compatibility that we used to have, when you would just kind of pass a drawing around departments and everybody could look at it and instantly clock what it was for and how to make it. So it's really great. It's sort of a best of both worlds scenario that we're entering into with this emerging technology. I'm curious as well, when you think about why companies need to invest in this, because it is an investment. You know, there are going to be stumbling blocks. There's going to be moments of incompatibility. You kind of got to go back and maybe it feels like redoing some work you've already done before, re-digitizing, resorting, recompatifying. Why are they doing this? Why are companies by and large still investing this time and energy and money into the digital transformation? What do they see when they complete it?
Digital transformation helps companies move quickly. When you're not in a digital environment, when you're either in an analog environment or when you're in an old world file naming convention system with disorganized data, inability to search, inability to analyze, right? You cannot move quickly. And this really, brings to light some really very recent events in the United States that have happened here between COVID, between dock worker strikes, and with our recent election results. And what I'm seeing happening there right now is this massive scramble in order to reshore a lot of work. And if the people aren't there anymore, let's be honest, average tenure within organizations these days is at an all-time low. It's not often that we retain employees for more than 3.5 years anymore. That knowledge is now locked away inside of a digital safe, so to speak. And without being able to transform it into a way that's easy to research, without taking this data out of the safe and allowing modern technology to help your people, it's going to take you a long time to figure out all of the pieces of your supply chain before you offshore it so that you can start rebuilding that puzzle again. With tools like Caddy, with a lot of other tools out there right now in this space as well, that can be one click of a button. Where was this part before? We outsourced it. Does that company still exist? What were the prices that they used to give us? What's their phone number? That's one click of a button can expose all of that data to you if you have the right tools, if you've gone through the proper digital transformation. I'm not talking about the digital transformation of taking things out of the file cabinet and putting them into a file naming system online. I'm talking about truly empowering that digital transformation with machine learning, with AI, and with well thought out processes that enable the humans to effectively do their jobs.
I think this is a wonderful example, because you're right. I think we're heading into a period of complete supply chain chaos, not to make it sound any more dramatic than it really is. And I think it used to be that people considered that sort of optimization, consolidating suppliers, negotiating better deals, revising old contracts. That's kind of a nice to have. Maybe when you get some interns in on the summer, that's something, stick them in front of a big spreadsheet, have them puzzle out maybe a couple better prices. But now that is very quickly becoming a need to have, because the old options aren't just suboptimal, they might entirely disappear. So I think we're going to see that, yeah, these truly digital companies, where that sort of insight, that sort of plan B emerges very naturally and automatically, instead of requiring often some very expert or tedious work to puzzle out. Those are the people that are going to be able to adapt fastest. Those are the people that are going to be able to potentially even grow a competitive advantage in this sort of turbulent time.
The last time I looked, I didn't see any Fortune 500 companies that had job postings available with librarian in the title. And guess what? Engineers, supply chain professionals, operations professionals did not go to school to become librarians. They don't want to be librarians in their day-to-day tasks. They want to be able to find things as easily as Googling them. And your organization's data doesn't live in Google. It needs somewhere else to live internally that's still safe, still protected, cannot be disseminated, but still be as easily asked questions about as Googling.
I love this analogy. It's to kind of extend it further. Right now, what most companies have is a set of encyclopedias, and maybe there's an index. But do you really, you're trying to remember, oh, what is the capital of Kazakhstan? Are you really going to dig out a giant and dusty encyclopedia and spend 20 minutes pouring through the index, flipping through pages? No, if you didn't have Google, there's so many little facts that we would just let escape us. I think a lot of manufacturing companies are in that exact same space where they have questions, they know things are suboptimal, they know there's answers that maybe lurk somewhere in some old filing system or, God forbid, a filing cabinet, and they just don't have time to get those answers. They need Google. They need a one-stop shop. And I think that is the promise of the 2024-2025 digital transformation.
I think so. And what I'm really looking forward to is taking it one step further and getting the Siri. You know what I mean? You talk about looking up the capital of Kazakhstan on Google. You're still opening up a browser. I'm shouting from across my house, "Hey Siri, what's the capital of Kazakhstan?" And she's trying to answer me now, even though I don't need an answer. But when I look at technologies like our own, when I look at some other technologies that are out there, we're not far away from that, right? Honestly, Caddy is a voice enablement, tool away from being able to say, "Hey Siri, where did I source part number 40762 before I offshored it?" We're not far away from that reality today.
That's amazing. And I think I totally agree that that is what people truly desire. I think this kind of speaks back to what we were saying about moving beyond the proprietary, moving beyond one way of accessing files, one interface, one UI. What meets everybody where they are, whether you're a new worker, whether you're someone experienced that needs a way to draw upon all of the libraries of knowledge they've built up over time, whether you're coming in from a completely different architecture. If you can just have like a human conversation with your data, when you can just ask your data questions like the one you provided, I think that is a really beautiful, extremely fast-moving future, one where you're really in touch with your strategic knowledge.
It's really interesting that you brought up a new employee to that, right? One of the biggest pressures facing the manufacturing industry today is this really increasing skilled labor gap, right? And that's actually one of the things that I'm most afraid about with all these reshoring efforts is at the same time we're reshoring things, we're lacking the labor in order to actually take on that work. Something additional that I learned recently from another leader within the manufacturing industry is that our 90-day retention rate on new employees in manufacturing is at an all-time low. It is 195 days. And this is because these are people who grew up with tablets in their hands instead of babysitters, right? These are people who, whenever they had a question, no matter their age, they would fire up Google and ask Google that question. These are people who we forced into solidarity through COVID and global pandemics, where the computer was their only interaction device. It wasn't with humans. They never learned how to tap on the shoulder of somebody more senior. They never even had the experience of staying 2 minutes late after class in order to ask a professor a question because the professor ended the Zoom meeting the second they were done lecturing. And now we're putting them into an environment, especially in manufacturing, where on day one, someone rolls out an old CRT TV with a VHS player and slaps on a 1980s OSHA VHS tape on safety. They're given, 30, 40-page documents, printouts that haven't changed since the late 90s and early 2000s in regards to the organization's SOPs and asked to read them before they start the job. And then they're told if they have any further questions, Jim over there has been with the company for 42 years. Just ask Jim. He knows everything. They're terrified of Jim. Everyone's terrified of Jim, but they're definitely terrified of Jim. And that's not the way that they can learn. They, going back to the original point, they require something like Google to learn the SOPs of the company, to learn how the organization does GD&T, how the organization has designed parts in the past. They cannot napkin sketch an idea and walk over to Jim and say, hey, have we ever designed anything like this before? Jim's going to scoff. He's going to shake his head and he's going to tell him to get out of his hair. And that is at the core what the digital transformation I'm talking about, that I'm visualizing, that you're visualizing, that Caddy's visualizing, is really all about, is empowering humans to work the way that they learned how to work. Empower humans to learn the way that they learned how to work, because the antiquated models of doing so are not working for the next generation. And it's only the companies that really embrace that concept that are going to be able to work and produce more with fewer people as we bring back all of this work with fewer heads running our floors.
It's wonderful because I think in the end, digital transformation truly is an empathetic process. It's one of meeting people where they are. And I think it can be tough if where people are isn't where you're used to being. But as you kind of adapt to the new ways of learning or the new ways of working your job, I think you'll see all sorts of other benefits emerge. Thank you so much for your perspective, Chris. I think this has been a very enlightening conversation. I'm sure there's plenty of other things we can talk about digital transformation. Maybe we'll discuss the topic further in the future. But for now, I'm Emily.
And I'm Chris.
Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.